a 7-year-old girl is murdered by the same neighbor helping search for her body, and within months, America creates a nationwide sex offender registry.
What the hell?
The woman was brutally attacked outside her apartment.
So the neighbor killed her and then tried to help look for her? Come on. That's some sick stuff.
While dozens are believed to have heard her screams, sparking the chain of events that eventually gave the country 911. And after 7 people unknowingly swallowed poisoned Tylenol capsules and collapsed dead, nearly every medicine in your house was redesigned. These aren't just horrifying crimes, they were so disgusting, disturbing, shocking, that they literally changed the laws we live by today. This is crime so horrifying, they changed laws. The murder of Megan Conca, Megan's Law. What if your neighbor, the one who helped you search for your missing daughter, was actually the one who killed her? Well, as unbelievable as that sounds, it is exactly what happened to the Conca family in Hamilton Township, New Jersey on July 29th of 1994. Megan Conca was 7 years old. She'd been playing outside when her parents noticed her bike sitting abandoned on the front lawn and no signs of Megan. So they did what any family would do. They panicked, called neighbors, and started searching the street. One of the people who came out to help look was Jesse Timendekis, the 33-year-old man who lived directly.
He looked like a weirdo. Look at him.
Across from them. He spent time searching alongside them and basically playing the part, you know, the concerned neighbor and all. And the whole time, he already knew where Megan was. He had lured her in earlier that evening, told her he had a new puppy and she could come see it. Once she was inside, he raped her, strangled her with a belt, and dumped her body at Mercer County Park.
He's a weirdo.
As I said, the worst part of the story is that Timendekis wasn't some random guy the Concas had never interacted with. In fact, their kids had grown up seeing him around. And nobody in that neighborhood knew because nobody was legally required to tell them that this man had already been convicted of assaulting 2 little girls before Megan. There were 2 separate cases, a 5-year-old in 1979 and a 7-year-old in 1981. In that second case,
I ain't gonna lie, they should give that family time with this man. Don't even take him to trial, don't even send him to court, don't even send him to jail. Give him some time with the family. That's the last thing he should see. Before that, they should T-word him, you know what I'm saying? And like do some really bad things to him because he's a fucking weirdo. Like, bro, like, come on.
He had choked the girl so hard she turned blue and her mother found her unconscious on the ground. The second judge literally called him a compulsive, repetitive offender who was a danger to children specifically. He got the full 10-year sentence, but he served less than 7. And it gets worse. Timendekis was apparently not living alone at the time of the incident. His 2 roommates in that same house, the house across from the Concas, were also convicted sex offenders. 3 men with records for child assault, all in the same home.
They just all weirdos. A trio of weirdos.
On a quiet residential street full of kids. The Concas had lived in that neighborhood for 16 years. They had assumed the best of the streets with zero idea who some of the people there were. Maureen Conca, the mother, even said that when Megan was raped and murdered by a neighbor, she then realized just how little she knew about her neighborhood. After that, they fought, and they fought fast. Just 89 days after Megan was killed, New Jersey had already passed Megan's Law, a mandatory sex offender registration, a state-tracked database, and public notification when a high-risk offender moved into a neighborhood. Richard and Maureen then pushed it state by state until May 17, 1996, when President Clinton signed a federal version requiring every state to maintain a public sex offender registry. Timendekis was convicted on all 8 counts in 1997 and initially sentenced to death, but when New Jersey abolished the death penalty in 2007, that became life without parole. He's still alive today, and the Concas, well, they still live in the same house in Hamilton Township.
Damn, they still live in the same house? Yo, they should be just T-wording that man in jail, just giving him all types of, taking his lunch, taking his commissary, just taking everything, taking his ass. They should be taking his ass. That's crazy. I never knew that's why Megan's Law was created.
Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act. This next case takes us to October 1998. Matthew Shepard was 21, a political science student at the University of Wyoming, openly gay, studying with dreams of eventually working in diplomacy. He was small, about 5'2", blonde, and wore braces. By most accounts, a thoughtful, sociable kid who'd had a rough couple of years before enrolling at Wyoming. He'd, for example, been gang on a high school trip to Morocco, and his mom later said he was just starting to feel like himself again. Well, that is before everything fell apart again. On the night of October 6th, he walked into a local bar called the Fireside Lounge after meeting up with friends on campus. He ended up chatting with 2 guys, Aaron McKinney and Russell Henderson, both 21, both working roofing jobs at the same time. According to the lead investigator on the case, McKinney and Henderson had gone into the bathroom at that bar and planned to pretend to be gay so they could get Matthew to trust them. The goal was robbery. Matthew left with them.
Come on. Why y'all do all that? Y'all pretended to be gay to lure him in just to rob him? Of what? Like, did he have a lot of money or something?
Once in the truck, McKinney pulled a gun, beat him, and took his wallet with $20 inside. They drove about a mile outside of town to a remote stretch of rocky prairie. Henderson tied Matthew to a wooden fence post with a clothesline while McKinney pistol whipped him with a .357 revolver, hitting him between 19 and 21 times. The sheriff later said the only injuries he'd seen comparable to that were from high-speed car chases. They then took his shoes and left him there in the cold. He stayed tied to that fence for 18 hours until a teenager riding his mountain bike the following evening spotted him and initially thought he was looking at a Halloween scarecrow. Matthew had 4 skull fractures, a crushed brainstem, and tear tracks down his face. That was the only skin not covered in dried blood. He never regained consciousness and died 5 days later. McKinney and Henderson were both convicted and are currently serving 2 consecutive life sentences for kidnapping and murder. The thing about this one is that the debate about motivation never fully settled. At trial, McKinney's lawyers tried arguing that Matthew had touched his leg in the truck and that triggered the attack, essentially a gay panic defense. The judge threw it out. But what's unsettling is that at the time of Matthew's death, that kind of defense was still legally admissible in most US states. Some argue the real motive was drugs and robbery, not hatred, but the robbery motive dropped away fast. And what followed was something more intense. The entire country was sort of up in arms against Matthew. Yes, there were protests kind of celebrating that a gay individual died. Vigils spread across the US, and even Matthew's father wore a bulletproof vest to the funeral because the threat level was that high. When it comes to James Byrd Jr., he was a black man from Jasper, Texas, when 3 white supremacists murdered him in one of the most cruel ways imaginable. On June 7th of 1998, Sean Berry, Lawrence Brewer, and John King dragged him for 3 miles behind their Ford pickup truck along a dirt road. James remained conscious for most of this act, but it wasn't until his body hit a culvert that his head and right arm were severed. They continued dragging him for another mile until they dumped his torso in front of a black cemetery. Brewer and King were executed, and Berry received life imprisonment. And out of all of it came the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, signed by President Obama in 2009, the first federal law to explicitly protect people from crimes motivated by sexual orientation, gender identity, or disability. It took 11 years to pass. The murder of Lacey and Connor Peterson, Unborn Victims of Violence Act. Sometimes a case just breaks your heart before it even gets to the crime, and this is one of those. Lacey Peterson was 27, 8 months pregnant, and she and her husband Scott had already picked out a name for their baby. It was Connor. By all accounts from the people around them, they looked like the picture-perfect young couple in Modesto, California. Then Christmas Eve 2002 happened. Lacey was last heard from the night before. She'd called her mom, stopped by her sister's hair salon, normal stuff. The next morning, Scott said he left the house around 9:30 to go fishing at the Berkeley Marina about 90 miles away. When he came back that afternoon, he said Lacey wasn't home, so he called her phone, left a voicemail, and reported her missing. In the early days, he was out doing local news interviews.
So he done bunned his baby mom.
Good mom. Appealing for help, and Lacey's own family was fully behind him, talking about what a solid marriage they had. But that didn't last long. Investigators started picking up on things about Scott's behavior that fell off. Then, on December 30th, a woman named Amber Frey went to the police and told them she'd been in a relationship with him. And weeks before Lacey even disappeared, Scott had told Amber he was a widower who was going to spend his first Christmas without his wife. He said that while Lacey was still alive. The case came to a head the following April when Lacey's body and the body of baby Connor washed up on the shores of the San Francisco Bay, right near where Scott had told police he went fishing on Christmas Eve. When they arrested him shortly after, he was at a golf course, he dyed his hair blonde, and had $15,000 cash, 4 cell phones, camping gear, survival equipment, and a dozen Viagra on him. He was charged with 2 murders.
What the fuck? Why you got so much Viagra on you?
Come on. First degree for Lacey and second degree for Connor under California's fetal homicide law. The jury convicted him on both, and he ended up being on death row, though the California Supreme Court pulled him off of it in 2020. He's now serving life without parole.
And how did if she was pregnant, how did he cut the baby out, or did I don't know.
But the bigger legal story was happening at the federal level because in April of 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act, which almost immediately got nicknamed Lacey and Connor's Law. What it said, essentially, was that when a pregnant woman is harmed or killed during the commission of a federal crime, the unborn child counts as a separate victim with its own legal protection. 38 states eventually followed their own versions. It's worth noting that this law was quite decisive from day one. On one side, abortion rights groups saw it as a way to quietly establish fetal personhood in federal law, which they argue would eventually create a legal conflict with reproductive rights, and on the other side, supporters of the law countered that when someone kills a pregnant woman, there are plainly 2 victims, and the law should just say that plainly. Scott Peterson, for what it's worth, has maintained his innocence since day one and is still fighting for a new trial, now with the Los Angeles Innocence Project in his
You're not innocent, man. You're done, bun.
corner. Whether that goes anywhere is another story altogether. David Berkowitz, the New York serial killer, son of Sam Laws. For over a year between the summers of
I never heard of this
1976
one.
and 1977, New York City was held hostage by a single man with a .44 caliber revolver. He called himself the Son of Sam. He killed 6 people, wounded 7 more, and nearly all of his attacks followed the same pattern: young couples sitting in parked cars at night. The city was so gripped by fear that women were dyeing their hair and buying wigs because several of his victims had long, dark hair and nobody wanted to be next. His real name was David Berkowitz, and before all of this, he was just a 24-year-old postal employee from the Bronx, quiet, unremarkable, but also, like most serial killers I guess, deeply troubled. Born Richard David Falco in Brooklyn, he was given up for adoption at birth by his mother, a woman that had not been married and that he never knew. The Berkowitz family took him in and renamed him, and for a while things seemed ordinary enough. But even as a child, people around him noticed something was off. He was caught stealing, killing animals, destroying property, and setting up fires.
Yup, that's how it starts.
Good man.
That's how it starts. They become thieves. They start killing animals and shit. Start drinking the blood of the animal. Start watching the animal die. That's how it starts. They should have seen the signs. Y'all gotta watch the signs, yo.
Was 14, his adoptive mother died of cancer. His father eventually remarried and moved to Florida, essentially leaving Berkowitz behind. He enlisted in the army at 18, returned 3 years later after having caught a venereal disease from a prostitute in South Korea, which he would later describe as his first and last romantic encounter. So you can already tell what was building inside him. Back in New York, alone and, on a sort of downward spiral, he made yet another discovery that pushed him further over the edge. His birth mother, whom he believed had died in childbirth, was actually alive. When he found her, she was distant and disinterested. For someone who had already convinced himself that women wanted nothing to do with him, that was apparently the confirmation he needed. He moved into an apartment in Yonkers, and by Christmas Eve 1975, something had fully snapped inside him. He followed 2 teenage girls on the street and stabbed them from behind with a hunting knife. Both survived, but neither could identify him. On July 29th of 1976, he approached a parked car in the Bronx where 2 young women were sitting and fired several.
All cause your mom don't want you and no girls are attracted to you?
Good man.
Like, what the fuck? Just at that point, why not just go gay? Ain't nothing wrong with it. Just go for men or something. Why go harm women? It don't make no sense.
Shots. 18-year-old Donna Loria died instantly. Her friend Jody Valenti survived. Berkowitz walked away and found out only the next morning through the newspaper that he had killed someone. What followed was a 12-month killing spree across Queens, the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. Police knew they were looking for a single killer, a white male in his 20s, black hair, average build, but leads kept going nowhere. The breakthrough, when it finally came, was almost embarrassingly mundane. After his last attack in July 1977 in Brooklyn, a witness came forward saying she'd seen a suspicious-looking man pulling a parking ticket from his car window near the scene. Detectives pulled the ticket records for that area, and that night, they came up with the name David Berkowitz. When police arrived outside his Yonkers apartment and found a rifle in his car, along with maps of the crime scenes and a letter written to the authorities, they knew they had their man. Inside his apartment, they found what they described as satanic graffiti on the walls and diaries cataloging every fire he'd set since he was 21. He confessed, pleaded guilty to 6 murders, and was given 6 consecutive 25 years to life sentences. But the part that outlasted everything else is that Berkowitz, it turned out, was enjoying the media circus around his case. Word got out that he and his team were negotiating a book deal reportedly worth $1 and $10 million, with Berkowitz personally set to receive a third. Literally the very next day, the New York State legislature moved to stop it. They passed what became known as the Son of Sam law, which allowed the state to seize any money a convicted criminal earned from selling their story and
done bun. Done bun, done bun, done bun. You thought you was gonna get paid. Nope, you're not getting paid. No commissary for you. Done bun.
A victim's compensation fund. As for Berkowitz himself, he's now apparently a born-again Christian, runs an online ministry with the help of evangelical supporters, and goes by a new name, Son of Hope. The murder of Kitty Genovese, the emergency call system. Before March 13, 1964, if something terrible was happening to you in the States, there was no single number to call. You had to know the direct line to your local police, or dial 0 and hope an operator.
Oh, okay, that's what happened. I was about to ask, if it was no 911, how the hell was people calling for help? So he said basically they was pressing 0 or they was calling the local police department. Oh, so this is the case that made 911 come about.
Connect you fast enough. But what happened to Kitty Genovese that night, and more importantly, what the world was told happened, would eventually change that. It was around 3:15 in the morning when 20-year-old Genovese pulled up to her apartment building in Kew Gardens, Queens, after finishing a late shift managing a bar. She was 50 feet away from her front door when a man named Winston Mosley, a complete stranger who had spotted her at a traffic light earlier and simply followed her home, came at her with a hunting knife. She screamed. A neighbor...
Ladies, and gentlemen, watch your surroundings. Watch your rear view, your side view. If it's a car following you, just be vigilant, And also, I believe everybody, males, females, y'all should have some gun training, especially females. Make this the last thing people see if they fuck with you. If they try to come with you, they try to harm you, they try to R-word you, make this the last thing they see. Just like that. Just that easy.
Robert Moser yelled from his window, "Leave that girl alone," and Mosley ran off but had gotten to her already. For a second, it looked like she could have made it, but she didn't. Seriously wounded, Genevieve crawled toward the rear entrance of her building, out of sight of the street. 10 minutes later, Mosley came back. He found her in a hallway, stabbed her again, assaulted her.
Wait, he left and came back? He really wanted this lady out of there. Like, why did he leave and come back? And why didn't they call the local police department? And why didn't they show up? It's just so many questions I got.
And stole $49 from her purse. Her neighbor, Sophia Farrar, who, worth noting, had no idea whether the attacker was still there, raced downstairs and held Genevieve in her arms until the ambulance arrived. Genevieve died on the way to the hospital. It turned out Mosley had been driving around Queens that night looking for a victim. Now, among the many strange things about him, it turns out that he was married, had 3 children, and no criminal record. Regardless, he was
so why'd he do it
entirely by accident when police responded to a reported burglary, found a stolen television in the trunk of his car, and brought him in. While being questioned at the station, a detective noticed scabs on his hands and connected him to the Genevieve case. Mosley confessed and also admitted to and murdering 2 other women. He was sentenced to death, later reduced to life imprisonment, and died in prison in 2016 at 81 years old. That was the story. A brutal crime, a random killer caught by chance, and a neighborhood mourning and left confused. But 2 weeks after the murder, on March 27, 1964, the New York Times published a front-page article with a headline that reframed everything. 37 who saw murder didn't call police. The piece, which originated from a conversation between the Times editor and police commissioner, claimed that 38 neighbors had witnessed the attack and done absolutely nothing. The story hit a nerve.
Why ain't y'all do nothing? Why ain't y'all go help or nothing? Y'all must didn't like that lady or something. That lady must have been a bad neighbor. I don't want to say that really, but why didn't y'all help this lady? Y'all saw this lady getting attacked by this man. Y'all just let it happen. Fuck it. Just let it happen. Just, I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Like, what? Y'all all could have jumped him.
So deep, it became a kind of cultural shorthand for urban moral collapse. Proof, supposedly, that city life had made people so detached from each other that they could watch a woman die and simply go back to bed. The problem is that it wasn't true. Decades of re-examination revealed that most people who heard something that night had no clear sense that a murder was happening. They caught fragments, heard a voice, and assumed it was a domestic dispute or a drunk. Only 2 neighbors are confirmed to have understood what was occurring and chosen not to act. One of them was a man named Carl Ross, who was drunk, cracked his door open, saw Genevieve on the ground and Mosley stabbing her, then shut the door and called a friend to ask what to do. The friend told him to not.
Why you call a friend, nigga? Go help her. What you gonna call the friend for? Bro, what should I do? What should I do? It's this guy out here stabbing this girl. What do you want me to do? What should I do? Nigga, by that time, by you asking him all that and him telling you, she's done bun. She's done bun by that time. You could have probably saved this girl's life.
Get involved. He eventually climbed out his window, went to a neighbor's apartment, and only called police after hearing Sophia Farrar shouting for someone to do so. But the myth was already out, and out of that myth came something real. 2 social psychologists, John Darley and Bib Latane, were so disturbed by the reported indifference that they began running experiments to understand it. What they found was that the problem was psychology. The more people present during an emergency, the less likely any single person was to act. Everyone assumed someone else would handle it. They called it the diffusion act of responsibility, and it became the foundation of what's now known as the bystander effect. And yes, it was built entirely on a story that was largely fabricated. The other thing the murder helped push into existence was more concrete. In the years after Genevieve's death, public pressure mounted around the chaos of emergency reporting, so in 1967, the President's Commission on Law Enforcement formally recommended a nationwide emergency number. In 1968, AT&T and federal government settled on 911, chosen because it was short, easy to remember, and wasn't already in use as an area code. The murder of Polly Klaas, 3 strikes and you're outlaw. On the night of October
That's a law in California, ain't it? 3 strikes? A 3 strikes law?
1st, 1993, 12-year-old Polly Klaas was...
So I think it's 3 violent felonies in California, and then you're done, but they're giving you life.
Having a slumber party at her home in Petaluma, California. She was playing a board game with 2 friends when a stranger walked through her door, tied up the other girls, and took Polly while her friends were left behind. The man who took her was named Richard Allen Davis, a career criminal with a long history of violence, kidnapping, and robbery. He had been in and out of prison his entire adult life, repeatedly released and, of course, repeatedly reoffending. The night he walked into Polly's house, he had been out of prison for less than 3 months after serving 8 years of a 16-year sentence for kidnapping.
So you got out doing 8 years and you still doing crime? So you wasn't in there like, oh, I don't never want to come back here. You just was outside like, oh, I want to go back. Like, this shit crazy.
2 months after the
Shit
abduction,
crazy.
Davis led police to Polly's body in a rural area of Sonoma County. He had strangled her, likely the same night he took her. He was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death in 1996. He remains on death row in California. But back to that time, the rage that followed was aimed right at the system, the very same system that had let him out. And in that fury, California moved fast. By 1994, voters had passed the 3 strikes and you're outlaw that says if you had 2 prior convictions for serious or violent offenses and committed any third felony, any felony at all, you got life in prison. The sentence for a second strike alone was automatically doubled. Within months, versions of the law spread to 23 other states. Then Senator Joe Biden helped push a federal version through Congress that same year. But guess what? What followed did not match the pitch. Within the first decade of 3 strikes in California, more than 7,500 people were sentenced to life in prison, nearly half of them for non-serious, non-violent offenses. The Stanford 3 Strikes Project, which represents people sentenced under
Don't do crime. Don't feel bad for people that's, oh, they ain't do nothing. All they did was run a red light. Don't do crime. Don't run red lights and get in a car accident that's going to fucking possibly kill somebody. Don't do crime.
the law has clients who receive life sentences for stealing $1 in loose change from a parked car, possessing less than a gram of narcotics, and attempting to break into a soup kitchen. One person
Don't steal. Don't burglarize people's shit. Like, it's that easy.
got life for stealing baby shoes, another person for stealing pizza. The law added an estimated $19 billion to California's prison budget, and criminologists found no evidence that it reduced crime or deterred violence. Abduction and murder of Amber Hagerman. Amber Alert. Every time your phone buzzes with an Amber Alert, well, there's a name behind the system, and it happens to have been a little girl from
This thing right here, when you in a mall or you in a grocery store or you somewhere, you'll hear everybody's phone going off.
Arlington, Texas, who loved her pink bike, her Pocahontas doll, and being a quote little mommy to her younger brother. She was 9 years old, and on a fateful afternoon we're about to see, she never made it home. On January 13th of 1996, Amber Hagerman and her 5-year-old brother Ricky left their grandmother's house for a bike ride, which they did all the time. Their grandmother had told them to stay close, no more than a couple of blocks away. After a few minutes, Ricky turned around and headed back. Amber wanted to keep going a little further. There was a ramp she liked in the parking lot of an abandoned Winn-Dixie grocery store, barely 2/10 of a mile from the house. It was 3:10 in the afternoon, broad daylight. A neighbor named Jimmy Kevel, a 78-year-old former sheriff's deputy, was watching from his backyard when he saw a black pickup truck pull into the lot. A dark-haired man, white or Hispanic, somewhere in his 20s or 30s, got out, grabbed Amber off her bicycle, threw her into the truck, and drove off toward the center of Arlington. Kevel called the police immediately. By 3:18 p.m., 8 minutes after the siblings had left the house, Amber was gone. Dozens of officers and federal agents flooded Arlington. They paused only to take quick naps. Tips poured in by the thousands, but none of them led anywhere. 4 days later, a man behind an apartment complex about 6 miles from the parking lot spotted something in a drainage ditch near a creek. It was Amber. She was naked except for a sock on her left foot. Her throat had been slashed. Investigators believed a knife or screwdriver had been used. The medical examiner determined she had been alive for roughly 48 hours after the abduction. Police believe her body had been moved there during a rainstorm, and that whoever left her there knew the area. That creek was secluded enough that you'd have to have a reason to know it existed. And nearly 30 years later, no one has ever been charged. But while the case went cold, something else was quietly starting.
Nobody was charged? We gotta find out who did that. We gotta find out who did it. And even if they owe, they people's gotta get some consequences for it. Because that's crazy.
A local Texas mother named Diana Simone couldn't get Amber out of her head. She kept thinking about how a little girl had vanished in broad daylight in a neighborhood in the middle of the afternoon, and nobody knew until it was too late. There were already alert systems for weather emergencies and civil defense events, she reasoned. So why not for children? She called a local radio station with the idea, and 14 days after Amber's abduction, wrote a letter requesting that if the system ever came to be, it should carry Amber's name. It was developed by Dallas-Fort Worth broadcasters and local police. The system, officially named Amber, for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, launched on July 5th of 1997, and the first successful recovery came a year later on November
2 days after my birthday. No, July 5th. Yeah, 2 days after my birthday. That's
10th
crazy.
of 98. Today, it operates across all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and 45 other countries. It has saved at least 1,221 children in the United States alone. The Manson family murders. Victims' Rights Bill. On the night of August 8, 1969, Sharon Tate was home. She lived in the Hollywood Hills. She was 26 years old, 8.5 months pregnant, and had a few friends over. Her former boyfriend Jay Sebring, a hairdresser whose client list included Steve McQueen, Frank Sinatra, and Warren Beatty, Abigail Folger, heiress to the Folger coffee fortune, and Wojciech Frykowski, a Polish writer and close friend of her husband's. It was a completely ordinary night until 4 people climbed over the fence. Charles Watson, Susan Atkins, Patricia Krenwinkel, and Linda Kasabian had been sent by a man named Charles Manson to kill everyone inside. On their way to the house, they ran into a teenager named Stephen Parent who had just been visiting an acquaintance at the property's guest house and was heading out to his car. Watson shot him dead at the front gate. Inside, Frykowski was stabbed more than 50 times and shot twice.
Damn.
Folger managed to break out of the house and made it to the front lawn before being tackled and stabbed 28 times. Sebring was shot, kicked in the face, and stabbed repeatedly. And Sharon Tate, who was 2 weeks away from giving birth, begged her killers to at least let her live long enough to have her baby. One of them stabbed her 16 times anyway. With a towel soaked in her blood, they wrote "pig" on the front door. The following night, Manson led a handful of followers, including Leslie Van Houten, to the home of Leno and Rosemary LaBianca, a wealthy couple who had absolutely no connection to Tate or anyone at the house. Manson tied them up, then he left, and his followers handled the rest. They stabbed Leno with a chrome-plated bayonet among other weapons and wrote "Helter Skelter" in his blood on the refrigerator. After that, Hollywood panicked, and for months, nobody had any idea who did it, until Susan Atkins, sitting in a jail cell on unrelated charges, couldn't help herself and started bragging to her cellmate. Manson and his followers were convicted and sentenced to death in 1971. The following year, California Supreme Court ruled the death penalty unconstitutional, and every single sentence was converted to life in prison. Now, this is the part of the story that actually changed something. Sharon Tate's mother, Doris, spent more than a decade after the murders barely functioning, still processing what had happened to her daughter and unborn grandson. Then she found out that Leslie Van Houten had gathered 900 signatures pushing for her parole. That was apparently the thing that broke through. Working with the National Enquirer, which printed coupons for readers to sign and mail in, Doris gathered 350,000 signatures against Van Houten's release so she would stay in prison. She then started fighting for something that, unbelievably,
don't let that lady out.
California, the right of victims' families to speak in court at all. Before 1982, a family could sit through an entire trial or parole hearing and have no formal mechanism to say a single word about what had been taken from them. Doris helped change that. The Victims' Rights Bill passed in California in 1982, allowing family members to testify about their losses at trials and parole hearings. 2 years later, at Watson's 1984 parole hearing, she became the first person to deliver what we now call a victim impact statement. She sat across from the man who had led the killers into her daughter's home and said, "What mercy, sir, did you show my daughter when she was begging for her life? When will I come up for parole?" All 50 states now have some version of that law. The Tylenol murders. Federal anti-tampering bill. You know when you're trying to open a bottle of Tylenol and you're fighting through the plastic wrap, then the foil seal, then the cotton wad stuffed inside, and you're just trying to get rid of a headache, and now you have an even worse one? All of that exists because of something that happened in Chicago in the fall of 1982, and the person who caused it was never found. It started on the morning of September 29th. Mary Kellerman was 12 years old, living in Elk Grove Village, a suburb of Chicago. She woke up with a sore throat and a runny nose. Her parents gave her one extra-strength Tylenol capsule, the kind everyone had in their medicine cabinet, and sent her back to bed. She was dead by 7 a.m.
Damn!
In the morning, a 27-year-old postal worker named Adam Janus in Arlington Heights collapsed and died of what doctors initially assumed was a massive heart attack. His brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa rushed to his house to be with the family, and then both of them got headaches, an understandable thing given the circumstances, so each took a capsule or two from the
I wonder how they found out, like, wait, it has to be the Tylenol.
same bottle of Tylenol sitting on Adam's counter. Stanley died that day. Teresa died 2 days later. 3 more people died in the days that followed. Mary McFarland, Paula Prince, Mary Weiner. All of them had taken Tylenol shortly before they died. When investigators finally made the connection in early October, what they found inside those capsules was a lethal dose of potassium cyanide, carefully packed into each one. But this poison hadn't been added at the factory. Someone had walked into grocery stores and pharmacies around the Chicago area, taken bottles of Tylenol off the shelves, pried open the gelatin capsules, which at the time were specifically popular because they were easy to swallow, which also made them easy to open, then laced them with cyanide and put them back on the shelves. In October, a tax consultant named James Lewis sent a letter to Johnson & Johnson, Tylenol's parent company, saying he would, quote, stop the killing if they wired him $1 million. Police eventually tracked him down.
Oh man, he was a weirdo. You're done, bun. They're not sending you no money, bro.
In New York, but he had no demonstrable connection to the actual poisonings. Anyway, he was convicted of extortion and sentenced to 20 years. The real killer was never identified. To this day, nobody has been. What happened next, though, is the business move. Johnson & Johnson pulled 31 million bottles of Tylenol off shelves nationwide before anyone told them they had to. And 6 weeks after the crisis began, they came back with a completely redesigned bottle. Foil seal, cotton wad, child-proof cap, plastic strip around the lid. All of that that made it immediately obvious to anyone if a package had been opened. The gelatin capsules, the ones that had been so easy to pry apart and refill, were phased out in favor of caplets, tablets coated in the same easy-to-swallow gel, but impossible to tamper with the same way. Meanwhile, the Congress passed what became known as the Tylenol Bill, making it a federal crime to tamper with consumer products. In 1989, the FDA followed with federal guidelines requiring all over-the-counter medications to come in tamper-evident packaging. Every annoying CO you've ever fought with on a bottle of aspirin or cold medicine is a direct consequence of 7 deaths in the Chicago suburbs that were never solved.
Never
Who
solved.
took
Crazy.
Johnny? The Johnny Gosch Bill. On the morning of September 5th, 1982, a 12-year-old paperboy left his house in West Des Moines, Iowa, and simply never came back. His wagon was found 5 blocks from home with not a single paper delivered. After that, he became a symbol, a turning point, and for his mother, an understandable 40-year obsession that still isn't over. Before any of that though, let's go back to that morning. Johnny had been doing his paper route for almost a year, and before any of that, let's just say he was the kind of kid who'd use his route money to buy a single rose at the mall flower shop and hand it to his mom with it hidden behind his back. So when subscribers started calling asking why their papers hadn't shown up, his parents knew immediately something was wrong. His dad went out and delivered the route himself. His mom called the police and waited almost an hour for them to arrive. Meanwhile, witnesses already pieced together a rough picture of what had happened. A blue two-tone car had been circling the area, the driver stopping to ask at least 3 different people for directions to 86th Street. A very tall man was seen walking behind Johnny on 42nd Street. Then a witness looked out his bedroom window just in time to see what looked like a Ford Fairmont run a stop sign and head north towards the interstate. The police's response? They asked Noreen if Johnny had ever run away before. This wasn't entirely surprising given the circumstances. Iowa law at the time actually allowed police to wait 72 hours before officially declaring a child missing, and the default assumption was almost always runaway. Making things worse, the police chief at the time, Orville, had already been accused that same year by 14 of his own patrol officers of beating a handcuffed prisoner, drinking on the job, and covering up a burglary investigation involving his own son. The city investigated, cleared him completely, and fired 2 of the officers who had spoken out. When Noreen later tried to identify a police officer she'd seen talking to Johnny under the bleachers at a football game 2 nights before his disappearance, she says Orville started yelling, stomped his feet, and told her she shouldn't question the man. That was the moment she stopped trusting the system entirely and started her own investigation, one that's still going. She wasn't wrong to push, because while the police were going nowhere, someone else came forward with information that would change everything, and then raise even more questions. In 1991, 9 years after Johnny disappeared, Noreen got a call from a private investigator in Nebraska. He represented a prison inmate named Paul Bonacci. He was serving time for child and claimed he had personally taken part in Johnny's kidnapping. The investigator had hours of recorded interviews where Bonacci described a coordinated, multi-vehicle kidnapping carried out by roughly half a dozen people. He said he was 15 at the time and had been coerced into participating at gunpoint, told he'd have his brains blown out on the dirt road if he refused. His role was to approach Johnny on foot, since children are less frightened by other kids than by strange adults. A man named Tony physically pushed Johnny into the car. Bonacci said he held a chloroform-soaked rag over Johnny's face. Then they drove out of town, switching vehicles multiple times, 1 car east towards Chicago, a station wagon south, and Johnny eventually loaded into a van heading west towards Omaha, then north to a house near Sioux City. Besides that detailed account, Bonacci also knew that Johnny had a dirt bike, he knew Johnny went to Noreen's yoga classes, he knew which Mexican restaurant they went to afterward, he knew about the birthmark on Johnny's chest that looked like South America, about the scar on Johnny's tongue from when he'd bitten it falling out of a treehouse, about a burn mark near Johnny's ankle from when his leg touched the tailpipe of his brother's motorcycle. None of that had been made public. The West Des Moines Police Department never interviewed him. As for what happened because of all of this, in 1984, Iowa passed the Johnny Gosch Bill, requiring law enforcement to immediately investigate any missing child case where foul play was suspected. That same year, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children was established, and Johnny's face went on milk cartons across the country. In 1982, 66% of missing children were eventually returned. That number is now 98 to 99%.
That's good. That's good.
Alright guys, if you like the way I explained those,
That's good, man. That's a good video. I learned a lot of stuff about some laws that I didn't know about. That's crazy. And it's some sick people in this world. Like, you would never think, like, I don't think jail is enough for some of these sick people. But y'all put your thoughts in the comment section. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. And I see y'all in the next one.